Scarbs, this time we're talking tyre sensors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Something as humble as the rear view mirror, which has been on racing cars forever, it's become very important now and a great place to package lots of sensors. So if we can now just sort of spin the car around and focus in on the mirror here. Now this mirror, it's not new. Mercedes have run this since testing, but they run this same mirror setup throughout the weekend and the race, monitoring the tyres all of the time. So what you can see is the little carbon fibre mirror pod here, and there's actually 3 different types of camera or sensor inside each of the 2 mirrors. So you have a small dot, you can see the slightly larger lens there with the 2 screws, and the bulge sort of facing the driver. Each of these has a different function and all crammed into a very small space.
Well, let's have a look.
So if we have a look at the first one, this small dot over by the Petronas logo, this is a sensor which is looking at the tyre in a very low resolution. So you can see that you've got a grid of temperature spots which it will monitor across the width of the tyre and across the circumference. And this is quite granular data. It's low in terms of its bandwidth usage, so it's great to be wired back directly to the pits as the car's lapping. So this is the live data that the garage will be getting, but it is quite granular and it's quite, as you can see, almost a pixelated view of the temperature of the tyre. Then if we move on to the bigger camera, this is where we start to get quite clever. Now they've been using infrared cameras on Formula 1 cars since the mid-2000s. At first they were quite large units, now lots of the teams run them, but they often only run them in free practice, and you'll see a very large mirror camera pointing out of the mirrors during practice. Mercedes have got it very neatly merged into the thing, and that's why they can run these all of the time. And what this is doing, this is a camera that's looking at real time, at a large spread around the tyre, very, very micro detail of the temperature throughout the tyre. We used to see the infrared shots of the cars, and this is very much the sort of thing that we're able to see at the teams. The problem with this is almost like video quality data, so they can't pass this back to the garage through the lap. So what they have to do is when the car comes back into the pit lane, surprisingly it's using Wi-Fi, humble Wi-Fi that we all have in our own home.
Hope it works.
Before the car's even parked into the garage, it has downloaded all of the data for those laps into the system, and the people in the garage and in the motorhomes and back at Brackley can look at all of this data immediately, work out what the tyres are doing and decide, particularly in qualifying, what they need to do for the next run to tune the car, change the setup to get most out of those really important front tyres.
And we should just add here, it's not like the old days where you can make a lot of changes obviously for the race because of the whole parc fermé situation, and indeed of course because of the lack of suspension travel anyway on these cars.
Also damping rates. You can actually, with a high frequency damping, actually change the tyre temperature by quite a lot. Equally, as we've spoken many times over the years, the brake duct blanking inside, so the heat from those brakes actually gets through the wheel into the tyre, and they can tune that quite finely just by using the sticky tape in between runs during qualifying. So it is still a very tunable area, but you're making very small changes to make a very small temperature change. But with these still quite sensitive tyres to temperature, that's important, and that's what gets you a pole position, and that's what gives you a very bad start to a race. So the other thing in here, if we just kind of flick around now and look at the back of the mirror, there's a little bulge again with a little camera pointing backwards, and this is actually the onboard camera that's looking back at the driver's head. There's again one in each mirror. It gives those fantastic views of the car, the driver's head being buffeted and the driver waving when they've won a race. All tucked in. Not all of the cars run the camera in the mirror, but they have the option to, and the teams have to have a mirror moulded and ready to accept.
You know, the days were when the mirror was like the triangle in a huge orchestra. You know, the guy got to hit it once, and of course it was hitting at the right moment was what mattered. And we always thought, yeah, mirrors. But now, of course, there's probably a mirror design team. Full cab thing, it's just a huge part of the car.
I mean, you notice now that these mirrors don't wobble along the straights like they used to. You get quite a good view out of the back of them. And then if we now just sort of pull away and have a look at the car in total, we can see what they also do with the rear tyres. Now, the camera looking at the front tyres obviously is quite a large unit, and it's very difficult to package it at the back. So if we can just kind of stop here, people always point out the little circle on the floor in front of the rear tyres and wonder what that is. That is exactly the same type of sensor as the first one we looked at that gives a very broad range of temperatures across the tyre, and that's constantly looking at the rear tyres and working out their temperatures. in free practice, when the teams can afford to run bigger sensors because they don't mind losing a tiny bit of aero performance, they have the big camera pods around the roll hoop here, and they will actually add the big infrared cameras looking at the rear tyres during free practice. But obviously once things get serious, as they go into free practice 3 into qualifying, all that kit comes off. So therefore you can then see there's a real advantage for Mercedes running this stuff throughout the weekend.
The final point, and this goes right back to the early Goodyear days when they first started running telemetry on the cars, I'm talking the 70s here, was trying to do a very accurate dynamic mathematical tyre model, which is obviously a Pirelli thing. And as talking to the teams as much as one can about that, they still haven't cracked that yet. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. So all this information is great, but if they had the perfect tyre model as well, they could do a lot more with it faster and more efficiently. But anyway, that's another story, I guess.